On Rescue 911, a downhill joyride takes a turn for the worse.
Call 911! Looked like he had a real bad head injury.
Leaving the victim badly injured.
Moving him in any way would be detrimental.
Will a neighborhood's heroic efforts and one family's love save the young cyclist?
The only thing that I could think of was he's not going to make it through the night.
Don't miss the next Rescue 911.
Some families are brought closer together by tragedy. Others are torn apart. Until the time comes, you can never know how it will affect you, as one family from San Jose, California discovered in January of 1989.
High above the city of San Jose, Sierra Road winds through the hills.
Kids have a tendency to ride their bikes down there extremely fast.
They like to reach the speeds going down 30, 40 miles an hour. When you're going that fast down the hill when you're on a bicycle that weighs only 5, 10 pounds, and a vehicle gets in front of you, there's just no way you're going to stop. Call 911!
Danny Gonzalez ran to try to help the youth.
He looked like he had a real bad head injury, and he was in convulsions and spasms. There was nothing I could really do for him. So I just waited there and tried to comfort him as much as I could.
Danny's girlfriend, Missy Kraushar, called 911.
San Jose emergency, what are you reporting?
Yeah, I have an emergency. There's this little boy who just fell off his bike. He looks pretty bad.
San Jose Fire Department EMTs were immediately dispatched to the scene.
We know right away that that's a downhill with a grade of about 40%, so we know it's going to be pretty bad. Most of them are, usually when we get there.
Al Castorina and his wife happened to be driving by.
When we got to the bottom of the hill, we saw the commotion. The boy was laying on the side of the road, and my first reaction when I saw him was nobody touch him. Moving him in any way at all would be detrimental. Does anybody know who he is?
No, I've never seen him around here before.
It was a real concern of mine that, who do we notify? Who do we tell?
The first rescue workers arrived within 5 minutes.
Upon arrival on the scene, I saw what was left of the bicycle, so we knew right away that it was a very serious injury. So we started getting the victim ready for when the paramedics arrived.
Art Fisher, who lived nearby, had also come over to help.
My heart just went out to this young man. It was probably the most darkest moment in his life.
When the paramedics started getting there was a growing concern of who he was.
He had no identification, no helmet, and nobody knew him. We just really felt very, very helpless. There was nothing anybody could do.
EMT Ernie Colson could see the boy's head injuries were massive.
When you see someone hurt this bad, they don't have a chance. So I more or less wrote the guy off.
The critically injured youth was loaded into the ambulance and taken to the hospital without anyone knowing who he was.
I have a son that's the same age, and you can see your own son there. I never thought he'd make it to the hospital, and I thought this kid could be alive today if he was wearing a helmet.
We were all powerless to do anything. If he was going to die, he was going to do it without anybody that knew him. He was going to do it alone, and his parents were not going to be able to share that last moment with their child.
Missy and other bystanders went door to door through the neighborhood, searching for someone who might know the injured youth.
There was an accident down.
No, I don't.
Nobody knew or ever saw him before.
The unidentified youth arrived at San Jose Medical Center, where he was treated by doctors, including trauma surgeon Jeff Gutman.
When someone has a head injury, the brain is swelling, but there's nowhere for it to go. It's surrounded by a skull. It's the swelling that people die from in head injuries.
The hospital needed to find out who the victim was. Trauma social worker Carmen Castillo was given the difficult task.
I had contacted the missing persons information line, and I was informed at that time that there was no parents calling in, and we kept coming up with nothing.
Time is critical. We have what we call the golden hour. It's the first hour after an injury. There are things we can do in that golden hour that can prevent permanent damage or death.
Just went off his bike. He was a young kid.
Because the boy was a minor, they needed a legal consent in order to operate, but they couldn't find his parents. When an unidentified youth suffered a serious head injury in a bicycle accident, his parents could not be located in time to give their consent for a critically needed operation. 10 miles across town, divorced parent Wes Smith was waiting for his older son Jason to get home for dinner.
He was always a very punctual son. Never stayed away from home when I didn't know where he was or when he would be back. And it was way too late. He should have been home, and he wasn't. We tried to sit down to eat, and I couldn't eat it. That terrible, terrible feeling that you get when you know something is wrong, but what?
By this time, a doctor and a judge had signed consents, and the boy had undergone emergency surgery to help relieve the pressure on his brain.
Hi, can you hear me?
Missy and the others who called were told the doctors didn't know he would survive the coma without brain damage.
I thought the police wouldn't take a report till he'd been gone for 72 hours, but just in the off chance that there was an accident involved somewhere, I thought I would call them.
Hi, this is Wes Smith. I live here in San Jose.
And the lady who responded started asking questions about him.
Joel, they may have him.
It's a gut-wrenching feeling I think that only a parent can feel. I just knew that it was him. And of course, I didn't even know how badly he was injured, or even if he was still alive.
Carmen had been told by the police that a man would be coming by the hospital who might be the father of the unidentified boy.
Mr. Smith? Hi, I'm Carmen Castillo. I had a bag of this child's clothing, and I took out the piece of clothing that was on top, and I remember him being very saddened by that. He said he had folded those underwear many of times to know that that was his son's. Then the next thing I'd like to do is go into the room, okay?
I began to realize that this indeed was the beginning of my worst nightmare.
If you could step out.
Joel was outside in the corridor. They didn't want to bring him in until we were sure it was indeed his brother.
We'll go this way.
His head was completely shaven. He was all bloody on one side of his head, and he had tubes and probes and everything going, all parts of his body, and the monitor going and a breather going, and you could hardly recognize him for what he was.
And it's okay to touch him, and it's okay to talk with him. We don't know whether the patient can hear or not, but if there's any remote possibility that the patient's hearing, the parent's voice would be very soothing to him.
Hi, son. Is your dad talking? How you doing, bud? I love you. Holding his hand was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. I wanted to, and I've always held his hand. That hand was not his hand. It was like holding a dead person's hand. There was no life to it, no warmth, just a cold lump.
We stood there looking at him for the longest time, and I was thinking, I wish I could have told him that I loved him more.
I'll be here, buddy. I'm not gonna leave you. At that time, I thought I better call his mother, who was living in Southern California and had no knowledge of this.
Jason's mother, Jeannie Smith, immediately caught a plane to be with her son. Her brother came with her for emotional support.
Nothing could have prepared me for the sight of my precious son laying there so close to death. And the only thing that I could think of was he's not going to make it through the night.
In that first 72 hours, it's difficult to give a good prognosis on what's going to come out. But in my heart of hearts, I did not think Jason would survive.
The first thing that Wes and I talked about was that if Jason should die, we wanted to donate parts of his body. We felt that if he did not live, that we certainly wanted somebody else to be able to live because of Jason.
I didn't have any feeling I could do anything at all for him other than to hold his hand and tell him that I loved him and stand by him. And we did that for night after night and day after day.
Jason remained in a coma without any improvement for 8 days.
Carmen met me outside and said, "We have a surprise for you today. Come on in."
I have a surprise for you guys.
I walked into the room and Jason was looking at me through one eye that was barely open and the other still completely closed and scabbed over. And he reaches up and says, "Hi, Dad." Oh, that was the most beautiful sound I've heard, and you can't remember when. It was just beautiful. My son had come back.
15-year-old Jason Smith was hospitalized for 6 weeks. After 4 months of intensive physical therapy, amazingly, he has made a complete recovery.
I was very surprised that strangers could care about me that much. They tended to me in my hour of need when I came to a Bouncing Buddy stop on Sierra Road, and I appreciate them for saving my life more than words could ever express. Since the accident, I have made a little card with my name, address, phone numbers of my parents, all information possible that would get me on safe ground as soon as possible.
It was such a joy to this mom's heart to see our son returning to us again. And the more that we were together, the more I realized this is my place, to be with my husband, to be with my sons.
After 8 years of separation, Wes and Jeannie Smith were remarried on November 17th, 1990.
I was the one that brought up the subject. I didn't want to be without my family anymore, so I decided to take the big plunge and ask Wes if he was still interested in remarriage. And of course he was.
Both boys really enjoy the fact that we are family once again. Joel just beams, and he'll shove us together. You know, give her a hug, Dad.
What's this?
You can't have look at it.
Oh, that's right. What I learned from this whole experience is that life is so precious. Your children are precious to you. You need to take every moment that you can and let them know how much you love them.
There's never a night that we don't kiss and hug each other goodnight. There's never a morning we don't kiss and say hello in the morning. And this is the whole family, not just a part of it.
Ship?
That's it.
What you did,
Yeah. Next.
Next, step inside the command center where the calls for help are answered and meet the real-life heroes who save lives. Stay tuned for another episode of Rescue 911. Next on Discovery Health Channel. Real life, medicine, miracles.
Mr. Shapiro, step out of the car, please.